In the modern era of global geopolitics, two contrasting forces shape the world's infrastructure, economic development, and international relations. China, which has become synonymous with large-scale construction and economic expansion, and the United States, which has increasingly been involved in military interventions and economic sanctions that lead to destruction and destabilization. While China's strategy revolves around investment in infrastructure, economic partnerships, and technological advancements, the US has often pursued policies that focus on containment, military involvement, and punitive economic measures. This video will explore these contrasting approaches, their historical backgrounds, their impact on global development, and the broader implications for the future of international relations. China's rapid economic rise over the past 4 decades has been fueled by an unprecedented expansion in infrastructure. The Chinese government has invested heavily in transportation networks, urban development, and industrial zones. Projects such as the world's longest high-speed rail system, massive hydroelectric dams like the Three Gorges Dam, and the development of smart cities illustrate China's focus on building for the future. China's emphasis on infrastructure has not only improved domestic economic conditions, but also lifted millions out of poverty. Investments in roads, railways, and ports have facilitated trade and economic activity, enabling China to sustain its growth trajectory. This model of infrastructure-led development has been extended beyond China's borders, particularly through initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative. The BRI, launched in 2013, is China's flagship global development project aimed at fostering economic integration through infrastructure investments across Asia, Africa, Europe, and Latin America. This initiative has resulted in the construction of roads, ports, railways, and energy projects that have enhanced connectivity and economic cooperation among participating nations. Critics argue that the BRI leads to debt dependency, but many nations have benefited from improved trade routes and economic opportunities. Countries such as Pakistan, Ethiopia, and Indonesia have witnessed substantial growth due to Chinese investments in critical infrastructure. The BRI exemplifies China's strategy of global engagement through construction and economic collaboration rather than military intervention. In stark contrast to China's global investment strategy, the US has been engaged in numerous military conflicts that have led to the destruction of infrastructure, economies, and societies. Since the Cold War, the United States has frequently intervened in foreign nations under the pretext of promoting democracy, fighting terrorism, or securing strategic interests. The Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, and the intervention in Libya illustrate the US's approach to geopolitics through military force. These conflicts have resulted in large-scale destruction, displacement of millions of people, and long-term instability in the affected regions. Instead of building, these interventions have left nations in ruin, with weak governments, shattered economies, and ongoing conflicts. In contrast to China's approach of investing in economic and infrastructure development, US interventions have often led to economic ruin and widespread suffering. The aftermath of US military operations has rarely included robust rebuilding efforts comparable to the infrastructure investments China has made in its partner countries. If you find this video insightful, then please like and subscribe, as it will help the channel. Economic sanctions and trade wars. The United States has also weaponized its economic power through sanctions and trade restrictions, which have often resulted in economic hardship for targeted nations. Countries such as Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, and Russia have faced crippling economic sanctions that have hindered their development and worsened humanitarian conditions. While economic sanctions are often justified as tools to pressure governments into compliance with US foreign policy objectives, their impact is largely felt by ordinary citizens who experience inflation, unemployment, and shortages of essential goods. In contrast, China's economic policies emphasize investment and cooperation rather than punishment and containment. Moreover, the US-China trade war, initiated during the Trump administration, exemplifies the American strategy of economic confrontation rather than collaboration. Tariff restrictions on Chinese technology firms and efforts to isolate China from global supply chains have created uncertainty and disruption rather than fostering mutual economic growth. Impact on global development. China's infrastructure-driven development model has contributed to economic growth and poverty alleviation in many regions. The construction of transportation networks, energy projects, and industrial zones has provided jobs and economic opportunities. In contrast, US military interventions and economic sanctions have often resulted in destruction, instability, and suffering. China's emphasis on economic partnerships creates a win-win situation for nations willing to engage, whereas US policies often result in long-term instability. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan cost trillions of dollars, yet these nations remain fragile, with ongoing conflicts and weak governance structures. Meanwhile, China's investments in Africa and Asia have led to significant improvements in infrastructure and economic performance. Influence on international relations. China's approach to foreign policy is largely based on non-interference, economic cooperation, and mutual benefit. The country's global initiatives, such as the BRI, offer developing nations an alternative to Western-dominated financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, which often impose stringent conditions on aid and loans. On the other hand, the US continues to assert its dominance through military alliances such as NATO, direct interventions, and economic coercion. The American approach has fueled anti-American sentiment in many regions, whereas China's strategy of economic partnership has gained its significant influence and goodwill. Future implications. If current trends continue, China's emphasis on infrastructure and economic cooperation may lead to a global shift in power dynamics. Many developing nations increasingly view China as a more reliable partner than the US, which has a track record of military intervention and economic coercion. The decline of American hegemony and the rise of China's global influence suggest a shift from a world order based on military dominance to one centered on economic cooperation and development. However, the competition between the two superpowers is likely to intensify, with the US seeking to counterbalance China's rise through alliances, military presence, and economic measures. Conclusion. The contrasting approaches of China and the United States in global affairs are stark. While China builds, America destroys. China's strategy of infrastructure development and economic partnerships has positioned it as a leading force in global development, whereas the US's focus on military interventions and economic sanctions has led to destruction and instability. As the world moves towards a new multipolar order, the effectiveness of China's model versus America's traditional approach will shape the future of global politics and economic development. The future belongs to those who build. If you enjoyed this video, then like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.